So for those of you who have been on my channel for a long time, I'm sure you remember back in the day that I used to do so many Straw Hat theories / discussions. I used to cover like all the Straw Hats, and a couple of them were taken down. I believe it was the Robin theory and the Chopper theory. I had like 2 Chopper theories. I'm not sure if they're up anymore, and if they are, I'm probably gonna have to take them down sooner or later. But I figured I would make sort of an updated version of those theories because I didn't really put that much detail into them, and I have so many more ideas for Chopper now, especially considering how important he's probably going to be in the Kaido arc. So let's just face it for a second. The Straw Hats haven't gone all out yet. We haven't seen 100% of their abilities, and I would imagine if Luffy can pull out crazy stuff like Gear Force, that the other Straw Hats would have similar trump cards. And Chopper has his own trump card, of course, that he's shown over the time skip, and that is Monster Point, which has sort of been his go-to ability, so it's not really a trump card, I don't think. It's sort of become the norm of whenever he fights someone who is significantly strong in the New World. We've mostly seen him use it as crowd control, and he hasn't really used it in any other situation where he can really show off the full extent of the ability. And even his other forms seem like they would be a little bit lacking when used against any sort of Yonko crew or any New World crew. But before we go into predicting what he might use, we have to first understand how his Zoan Fruit works, and specifically how he has used it over time individually and how he has developed it uniquely. And to understand Chopper's abilities to the fullest extent, we have to understand 3 concepts, which are Zoan Hybridisation, Zoan Awakening, and the Rumble Ball. So everybody who has been paying attention to the story thoroughly should understand that Zoans have 3 primary forms, which are the human form, the human beast form, and then the beast form. So the middle form is the hybrid form, as some like to call it, which is basically when you combine your human traits with your animal traits, and most Zoans we have seen have only used those 3 transformations. Now there are a lot more than 3 forms, and we've seen specifically from CP9 that they have the ability to use their life return and other abilities that Rokushiki provide to enhance their Zoan transformations. Rob Lucci and Kaku were the main people to really show off these abilities and different hybridizations of their Zoan ability. Rob Lucci could use a slimmer version of his hybrid form to keep up with Luffy, basically enhancing his speed and using more of the leopard speed. Kaku could change the length of his neck and several other parts of his body, and even guys like Marco from Whitebeard's crew have been able to master their fruit enough to sort of change different parts of their body. One other exception to the 3 primary forms are the artificial Zoan transformations, which allow you to change individual parts of your body. It's a lot more mutated and complex than standard Zoan abilities. And in terms of awakening, we know that the Impel Down Zoan guards were awakened, and Crocodile basically explained that it gives you extra endurance and regeneration. Now Chopper is very special through the way he fights with his Devil Fruit. He uses the assistance of Rumble Balls, which sort of alter the transformations, basically giving him a lot more potential than the standard 3 forms give him. And using several of these Rumble Balls, he can actually go into some form of pseudo-awakening form. And that is, of course, what we know as Monster Point. Now, we're not 100% sure if that's an awakening, at least it hasn't been pointed out yet, but it does seem very, very similar to the Impel Down Zoan guards. Now, I will say it's probably incomplete considering that he can only maintain the form for a certain amount of time, maybe due to the fact that he can't control it outside that time limit, so he has to revert back to normal. We know that the Impel Down Zoan guards can use their awakening form for an unlimited amount of time, at least it seems that way. So Chopper can only use it for a very small amount of time, whereas the Impel Down Zoan guards seem to have used it the entire time Luffy was fighting through Impel Down. And the fact that they have no control over their ability could be an indicator that being awakened for too long can make you lose control. We know pre-time skip Chopper couldn't control his Monster Point at all, so maybe the 3 minutes are just the amount of time he can control it, and then he just reverts back to normal. And that's one of the reasons I imagine that he hasn't grasped a full control over his awakening, and that's why I named it a pseudo-awakening. But if we actually study Chopper's Monster Point, you would imagine that enhancing his Devil Fruit toward what it's meant to be, which is a human-human fruit, he would grow more human over time rather than more animal-like. But Chopper's Monster Point only seems to be a stronger hybrid form, if anything, and he doesn't actually grow more human, at least not that much more human than his other forms. In other words, what if this Monster Point is only a base form of a whole new tier of transformations? And to clarify for some people, Chopper's Brain Point is actually his hybrid form. And here is a diagram of his other primary 3 forms. In Brain Point, which is his primary hybrid form, we actually see that he has horns still, but he stands upright and he's pretty small considering the fact that he's young, of course. His standard reindeer form is, of course, his standard reindeer form. He looks like a reindeer. And then, of course, his human form. A lot of people don't think that this is actually his human form, but it is. He's just kind of hairy, I guess, because he's a reindeer. I guess for some reason when he goes human, he doesn't lose all of his hair. But it is still his human form. And just to prove the fact that his monster point reflects his hybrid form, you can clearly see that in his monster form, he still maintains his deer-like face, his hoofs, and his antlers, whereas he looks a little bit more human, but it is just an enhancement of his hybrid form. Now, unlike the Impel Down Zoan guards, he has actually trained himself to actually act more human-like. He can express himself, he can choose who to attack, whereas the Impel Down Zoan guards are sort of just like animals. They run around and just attack anybody. So naturally they wouldn't be able to control themselves. But Chopper, on the other hand, since he has now control over his gigantic monster form, I think it is fairly convincing to say that he could actually alter his different monster forms and give him a human monster form and maybe a deer monster form. And you could even take this one step further and say that he could have a monster jump point or a monster horn point. And obviously this would all still be limited to the 3 minutes he has established, but using this type of diversity within Monster Point could allow him to adapt to certain opponents. Say if an opponent is really fast, he could use Monster Walk Point to catch up with them. And when talking to Luffy in Fishman Island, Chopper actually said that he would become more monster-like in order to become a stronger member of Luffy's crew. So I think this could be a potential foreshadowing of his newfound reliance on Monster Point. And to end this off on more of a crazy note, pre-timeskip, Oda had actually designed a transformation that would go beyond Monster Point when Chopper ate 4 Rumble Balls. In this SBS, he says that when Chopper eats 4 Rumble Balls, the author goes crazy. And obviously this was more of a gag if anything, but it does make me wonder that if Oda really does want Chopper to evolve to be on par with the Yonko crews and eventually a Pirate King high rank, what kind of transformations would await us beyond Monster Point? But of course, this is only a theory, so don't take it too seriously. I just thought I'd share it with you guys. I thought it was a pretty interesting concept. I had made a video like this a very long time ago, as I said before, but I just love this idea so much that I thought I'd just revamp it on my channel. And if you also enjoyed it, I would appreciate a thumbs up and a subscription if you haven't already. But other than that, I will see you all later.